Never before have I seen such clear differences between what the events themselves imply and what the film tells us they mean. With two character arcs in particular, those of Finn and Poe Dameron, this dissonance is especially bizarre because what their journeys imply is almost the opposite of what the film tells us. I'll be explaining why I think that, and why in the case of Poe's storyline, the profound disconnect between what we're shown and what we're told severely weakens some important messages that The Last Jedi tries to convey. Okay, let's start with Finn's character arc. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the film to suggest that Finn goes from being a would-be deserter to card-carrying rebel scum because of what he sees on Canto Bight. All the suffering he sees here isn't caused directly by the First Order, but the people they buy weapons from, because this is pretty much the arms dealer planet, apparently.
There's only one business in the galaxy that'll get you this rich.
War.
Sure, that means the First Order is still complicit in a lot of exploitation, and that ain't great. But it turns out the Resistance is complicit in this as well, because at least some of those dealers are also selling X-Wings and stuff. Makes sense, you gotta diversify your portfolio, I guess. So how do these events simply make Finn hate the First Order all the more? If that's really where the film is supposed to lead Finn, Canto Bight needs to be a planet that the First Order controls directly, and it needs to look a lot more like this. And let's not forget, Finn's already seen the First Order do some pretty heinous shit.
Kill them all.
With the Canto Bight we actually get, it makes more sense for Finn to go back to the Resistance to say, guys, you can do better. From now on, only buy fair trade. And so Finn's radicalization throughout this film is not well motivated, which means all this social commentary is mostly pointless, and there's nowhere near as much dramatic payoff as there should be when we reach this moment. When it comes to Finn's storyline, I know a lot of people think this is the worst part. And sure, survival looks unlikely, but otherwise, I actually don't mind this. The film makes it pretty clear that Finn's suicide run probably would have been useless.
The cannon is charged! It's a suicide run!
It's too late! Don't do this!
No!
But yeah, the reason Rose gives for stopping Finn is very, very silly.
That's how we're gonna win. Not fighting what we hate. Saving what we love.
She says this like 5 minutes after the most useful act of protection in the entire film, which looked like this. This act is framed as heroic and is essentially the same thing Finn was hoping to do, stop the First Order for long enough for the Resistance to get away. So film, what are you trying to tell me? The idea that saving what we love is more important than fighting what we hate is a good one though. Being so stringent about distinguishing between the two is a little incompatible with everything else we've seen in these films, but maybe that just makes it all the more refreshing for Star Wars. Unfortunately though, the film makes even more of a meal out of this message with the way it tries to prove it in Poe Dameron's storyline. Poe's character arc is a bit more complicated because he is supposedly meant to learn two things. That the more confrontational approach is not always the best.
There are things that you cannot solve by jumping in an X-Wing and blowing something up.
And that he should have greater respect for authority, perhaps more specifically, female authority.
Disengage now, Commander. That is an order.
But the way things play out, it doesn't really make sense for Poe to learn either of these lessons. I'll just focus on the first one for now. You need to recognize when it's better to retreat, Poe. Throughout the period of time when the Resistance is being slowly chased by the First Order, Poe is committed to a plan he hatched with Rose and Finn, to find a master codebreaker to get them aboard the lead Star Destroyer so they can deactivate a tracking device allowing the Resistance to light speed away without being followed. Yeah, it's a very brazen plan with a lot that could go wrong, but Poe is operating under the impression that the only alternative is waiting until they run out of fuel, at which point the First Order will catch up with them and shoot him down. He has this impression because Vice Admiral Holdo, the commanding officer, has led seemingly everyone to believe that she doesn't have a plan of her own.
Tell us that we have a plan! That there's hope!
When I served under Leia, she would say, hope is like the sun.
But of course it's eventually revealed that Holdo does indeed have a plan, and that it's a good one, involving abandoning the main ship to sneak down to an old rebel base, apparently a maneuver that the First Order is likely to miss. The film tries to frame Poe's discovery of this as proof to him that sometimes it is better to plan a quiet escape than do something risky and confrontational.
She was more interested in protecting the light than she was seeming like a hero.
But this is very unfair on Poe, since he never has a chance to actually compare this plan to his own.
Hope is like the sun.
In order for Poe to truly realize that Holdo's plan is better, and hence that his general approach to leadership is wrong, he would have needed to learn Holdo's plan really early on, reject it, and then cook up his own plan which blows up in his face, and then see Holdo's plan succeed. Once Poe actually hears Holdo's plan, he likes the sound of it straight away.
That could work.
And this is before his own plan even fails. So what the hell? How can the film act as if the revelation of Holdo's plan gives Poe a greater appreciation for the value of retreating when it seems like something he would have agreed to anyway if he knew it was an option? This lesson just doesn't work. And funnily enough, the main thing undercutting it is the way the film tries to teach Poe his other lesson. Like I said, the film also wants to show Poe learning greater respect for female authority.
That's Admiral Holdo? Battle of Chiron Belt, Admiral Holdo? Not what I expected.
It is strongly implied that Poe should have trusted Holdo all along, should have never doubted her competence as a leader just because she wasn't showing him her homework. Admittedly, he really should have run his plan by Holdo before he, Rose and Finn committed to it, but in terms of narrative function at least, Holdo's secrecy is far worse, since she's the one the film tries to present as an exemplary leader. Holdo lets pretty much the entire crew believe they're probably gonna die within a few hours.
Those transport ships are unarmed, unshielded. We abandon this cruiser, we're done. We don't stand a chance.
When in fact she has a really good plan to avoid that. All the arguments I've heard in defense of this are rubbish. If Holdo is afraid of spies, the film would need to show us that. If this reflects common practice in the military, which I highly doubt it does, it would say a lot more about how bad the military can be than how just Holdo's actions are. Some think it's enough for Holdo to keep information from Poe on account of the fact that she doesn't trust his instincts.
You're impulsive. Dangerous.
But wouldn't you think it's better to keep a likely troublemaker in the loop? Especially when the entire fleet is in such a precarious position? Surely you'd think this person is more likely to do something rash if you let them think there's no plan than if you show them that there is a plan and make it clear why it's the best option. It doesn't matter how good Holdo's plan turns out to be. Her secrecy is irresponsible to the point of being callous, and makes it seem totally justifiable for Poe to relieve her of command, given the information available. It's absurd that the film ultimately says Holdo's a great leader, and Poe really should have given her the benefit of the doubt, when there was literally no doubt to give her the benefit of. And that's a shame, because the message here regarding trust for women in power deserved a stronger argument. At least the film shows that dudes who generally seem decent can still be guided by biases. It ain't just the obvious dickheads, you know. So there you go. What we see in these two storylines is almost in direct opposition to what the film tells us we're meant to make of them. Finn should develop mixed feelings about the galactic conflict, but instead, he develops an unadulterated hatred for one side.
I won't let them win!
And Poe learns restraint and respect for female authority through a situation where it was more reasonable to be brazen and rebellious. And these were just the flaws I found most bizarre. There are others that I think are also quite significant, but they're a subject for another video. When The Last Jedi came out, I found it quite annoying that most of its defenders assumed one couldn't really take issue with how the film used its story ideas. That one could only dislike this film if they simply did not like those ideas, especially those relating to the film's progressive agenda. While it certainly seems there are those who do not like the film's progressive agenda, I suspect that, whether they are aware of it or not, a lot of people dislike this film not because it doesn't feel enough like the Star Wars they know and love, but because it doesn't offer a strong enough alternative. I hope Disney recognizes this, because it would be a shame if they think The Last Jedi's commercial failure relative to The Force Awakens means that Star Wars doesn't have room for more boldly original and progressive story ideas. Anyways, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on the matter, especially how well The Last Jedi story ideas work for you, and what kinds of ideas you'd like to see in any future Star Wars films, including what you hope to see very, very soon. Take care, friends, and may the midi-chlorians be with you.